Okay, so here's what I'm thinking. The original plan was we have a front yoke and a back yoke. We have a front tier and a back tier. 1, front and back tier 2, front and back tier 3, which would mean we would also have front and back ruffle 1, ruffle 2, ruffle 3, and ruffle 4. What if instead of having one front tier and one back tier, cut 2 of the same? So I measured my yoke right here in the front and in the back. The front is 9 and the back is 9.5. So basically across that yoke style line, the back is an inch larger, the tier is an inch larger than the front. But I can just ease that tier into the front yoke and then cover it with a ruffle. So even if I do bad at easing it, it's not gonna. And then instead of having to figure out which one's my front tier and which one's my back tier, I just have to know which one's 1, 2, 3, 4, or sorry, 1, 2, 3 tiers. So I think that will simplify my life. So what I'm suggesting is that we get rid of these front tiers and just have cut 2 of each of these tiers that we're gonna pull from the back. So they're no longer back tiers, they're just tier 1, 2, 3. Next, I need to design my ruffles. So now that I have tiers that are all the same size, I can use those measurements to determine the size of my ruffle in this direction. How you decide your fullness on your ruffle has a lot to do with aesthetic, yes, but also with what kind of textile you're using. I'm going to use a 2-to-1 ratio, which is pretty standard, especially for a plain weave cotton fabric like most of our projects are designed around. I'm also thinking, well, and just FYI, if I was using chiffon, I might use like 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 because it's a thinner fabric and the ruffle just, the gathering just kind of disappears into it. And if I was using a thicker fabric, I might use less than 2-to-1, like 1.5 or 1 3/4 or 1 1/4 to 1, depending on what I was trying to achieve. So I measured each of my tiers. So I measured tier 1, I'll use my front. I measured this line, which in my back was 9.5. And then I measured this line, which on my back was 10 3/4. And I measured this line, which in my back was 11 7/8. And I measured this line, which in my back was 13. So now I would have to make 2 ruffles for each layer. I think I'm going to use my fit sample in the true spirit of like a fit sample where I try and figure out if something's going to work or not. What I'm thinking is I'm just going to pick one ruffle size and I'm going to do cut 6 instead of cut 2, cut 2, cut 2, cut 2. So normally if my last ruffle is 13, so a 2-to-1 ruffle would be 26, 13 times 2. But what I thought is, what if I average each of these measurements? So my bottom ruffle, my second, and my first. I average all of those measurements and I just make one ruffle that's cut 6. So what I did was I typed in all of my ruffle measurements. So first, the one that connects to the yoke, and then the second, third, and then the fourth that's not going to have an underlay, it's just going to have a ruffle. And the average of those measurements is about 11 1/3. So I'm thinking instead of having 3 different kinds of ruffles, I think I'm going to have one ruffle that I'll cut 6 times that's based off of my average measurement. So it is going to look a little more gathery up near the waist and a little less gathery down near the hem. So I think I'm going to use 11.5 as my measurement that I'm going to double for my ruffle. Okay, so now I have an idea of how gathery my ruffle is going to be. So how like long, I guess it would be wide, how wide this piece is going to be. Yes, I know, you want a snack. Now I need a length, right? So these tiers are 3. I want my ruffle to come out of this seam and cover up the next seam. So if my tier is 3 for this skirt length, I'm going to make my ruffle 4 inches wide. So what I did was I drew a rectangle. So here I have a rectangle that is 4 inches tall by 11.5 inches wide. So I need to double that. So I'm going to go out another 11.5 inches. And then 4 for the height of my ruffle. So this is half of one ruffle. Half of one ruffle. So that means that this here would be on the fold. And this length is 11.5 plus 11.5, which is 23 inches. On the fold, that would be 46 inches. The reason I'm thinking that is good is because if I use this 13 inches, for example, so let's say I kept with my original plan to have different pieces for my front and my back, right? By the time I got to this 13-inch ruffle, that's 26 inches, and when I fold that, that's 52 inches wide. And that's when I go to grade this pattern up to a 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, and up, I am not going to have enough, like a wide enough fabric to create my ruffle. So I'm going to have to start making new patterns because I can't have a seam on my size 22 that I don't have on my size 8. So I think that by using this ruffle width, it would work for producing a similar look in larger sizes. So that is going to be our experiment, right? So I have a fold here, so that, and this is 11.5 times 2, because 11.5 was the average of each of these tier measurements. And then I times 2 to get a ruffle that's gathered. And then I'm going to put that on the fold because this is only half of a back and this one is half of a front. So I need these on the fold. I need my ruffle on the fold as well. And then this ruffle is going to be cut 6. So this is my ruffle. And it's going to be 6 over size 8. And my plan is to cut this out of self. And then we put the rest of the information, our style number, style name. What do we put under here? Name, date, and all that. Oh, the ref number. So my reference for this, this doesn't have, like, the fact that I manipulated this doesn't have a number yet, but my ref for this was the 502 new block that I created in fall 25 for Iris. So that'll be my ref. My reference number is 50, oops, I need to put my initials, or the initials of the person whose pattern I copied, HLL 502, and this is fall 25 version, and the person or form or whatever, the fit is Iris. So again, this is going to go on the fold, and it's going to be cut 6. And when I put that on the fold, I will add 1/2 inch seam allowance to the top of the ruffle so that it can sandwich into the seam with the underlay. And I'll have 1/2 inch seam allowance on the side seams where I sew them together to create the whole round skirt. And then my hem allowance at the bottom of the ruffle is going to be determined by how I decide to hem it. Our example has a 1/8 inch narrow double roll hem. So you have to roll the hem up 1/8 and then up 1/8 again if you have a special foot. And then there's the thickness of the fabric. So for a 1/8 narrow roll hem, we do 3/8 or 5/16 or something a little bit more. If you're using the narrow roll hem technique Fash 1A, you start off with 5/8 and then you fold, trim, or you stay stitch, press, edge stitch, trim, press. But you start off with 5/8 that you eventually roll up to a 1/8 double roll hem. So if you're using the technique that you learned in 1A without the foot, you are your contractor and you would need 5/8 inch seam allowance in order for this ruffle to finish 4 inches. If you plan on using the narrow roll hem foot, I would like draw some grid lines on a piece of muslin and then use your narrow roll hem foot to roll hem the fabric and then do some calculations to figure how much got folded up. Or you can hem something with your narrow roll hem foot and then take out the stitches and unroll it and measure from that stitch, like how much fabric do you need. But basically it's 5/16, 3/8, something like that, if you're using a foot. So we'll get to seam allowances later. Nugget needs a snack.